Andrew. So about taking all the information from that research project and looking at it in more thoroughly from a practical point of view, and giving us some sort of steps and some targets to follow about decision making about whether the ewes are fit to join. So Andrew is a veterinarian. He also works for Livestock Logic. He's based in Hamilton in Victoria. These days he mostly works as a sheep consultant with producers in Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales. He also runs his own sheep enterprise, breeding white Suffolk rams, and does some livestock trading as well. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sue. You can hear me all right?
Yep, fine.
Cool. Okay. And thanks, Mary, for that presentation. That was great, and it does lead into quite well into some things we'll discuss here. But essentially, another MLA sponsored project that we what are we? We've finished the literature review and some case studies, which is what I'm going to talk about today. We're still developing some sort of producer templates and information, which will probably be in the form of some videos to help with people doing these assessments. So that'll sort of come out in the next 6 months. And the project Mary spoke about was a 3-year project that MLA sponsored. So I guess you're levy at work, I guess. Now I've got the same problem as Mary. Why isn't this changing pages?
Yeah, just it hasn't changed over yet.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay. So essentially, what we wanted to do was really just, in light of coming out of a drought in most of Eastern Australia, we knew that there was going to be a demand for people to increase their ewe numbers, and we wanted to try and give people some scientific-based decisions to decide, well, which sheep can we keep and run for another 12 months or another 2 years, and not just be purely focused on production outputs or sheep that might give us the very best lambing percentages. Let's think about, well, how does this affect the whole farm system in terms of the cost of getting those sheep? So I'll take you through a little bit of a very basic analysis comparing the productivity of different sheep in a second. And I'll also discuss in some detail the 3 farmer case studies where we assess sheep and compared the sheep on their farm that we didn't think were fit to join versus those that were. And the 4th focus is essentially what's still in production. So I just want to show you this. So I just need to close down a little part of this so I can actually see it myself. There we go. Okay, so don't get too hung up on the details here, but it just helps to show you guys why we think it's really important that you think about which sheep are productive on your farm. But essentially here, I'm using a maternal prime lamb production system where we join ewe lambs. And as you can see here, I'm sort of highlighting the ewe lambs with the idea being that is generally our replacement ewes in a maternal ewe flock. And the more older sheep we tip out, the more younger sheep we need to bring in to end up with a similar stocking rate. Obviously, keeping in mind that stocking rate is still our number 1 profit driver on farms. So what am I trying to show you here? I've put out some numbers here in terms of conception rates for different ages of sheep and then different survival rates. With the end goal of what I'm trying to show you is the productivity or the income generated from different sheep. And also I've got in here the value of those sheep at the start and at the end of a 12-month period. So as you can see, we get better or higher scanning percentages with our sheep that are in the sort of the middle years of their life, and better twin survival in sheep that are sort of 3, 4, 5-year-old, but it drops off as they get older, and it's also a hell of a lot lower in the first year. And point here is, regardless of the age of a sheep, the first year at lambs, it has compromised lamb survival outcomes because it's a first-time mother and it does not know how to get the lamb sucking and drinking as quickly as a sheep that's done that before. So I'm going to take you to the next slide. Again, it was being slow. There we go. So the other thing I just want to point out here is when we join new lambs, because they don't hit puberty as early, we have to join them later. So just highlighting here that lambs out of ewe lambs are typically 15 to 17 kilos lighter at the end of the production season, due to the fact that they're typically, and this is in most systems, they're 6 to 8 weeks younger, and that significantly impacts the income we generate from those sheep. So as you can see here, that they might be generating $112 lambs versus $180, $190 lambs out of adult sheep. So and this is the value of the ewe at the start of the 12-month period versus the value of the ewe 12 months later. So we are taking into account that ewe lambs do go up in value significantly from 1 year of age to 2 years of age. Now, I guess I'll jump to the end of this because it's not really the focus, but it's just to make people think about their production system. But you can see here the margin on ewe lambs, even when we take into account their significant appreciation in value going from 1 to 2 years of age, is not that good compared to some of the older sheep that are essentially not losing, or they're not depreciating at all, a 6-year-old ewe. If we can keep her because she's healthy and get her through to 7 years of age, then there's actually a better margin in those sheep than turfing them out and buying in more 1-year-old sheep. So I guess that's why this Fit to Join project has come about, is we're trying to help people identify sheep that they can retain for another year and still get production out of it, and also highlight ewes that might be in the 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old age bracket that have other issues and are going to give you poor outcomes. So the factors that influence fitness to join, their age, condition score, udder health, mouthing, and lameness, and previous performance. Although this was not a part of our case studies, but I will touch on that today. So I'm going to touch on each of these factors. If we're in a room together, I'd love to sort of get people's feedback on which of these they place most of an influence on. My experience with working with clients is that most people work on an age, and essentially it's a colour tag that gets drafted out at the end of the year, and the majority of people are not placing much emphasis on other issues, and I'm amazed at how few people do actually take the time to assess actual udders of sheep. And mouthing is probably something that's been done considerably, but I'll sort of point out that that's probably one of the least important of these 6 points. Right, so mortality rate increases exponentially in ewes older than 5 years of age, and essentially that means the death rate in 6-year-olds will be double that of 5, 7s will be double that of 6, and 8-year-olds will be double that of 7. So if we're sitting at, for Mary's work, if our average 5-year-old ewes is 2%, well, it'll be 4% death rate in 6-year-olds, it'll be 8% in 7, and we're up to 16% in 8-year-old ewes. And I see that all the time in clients' flocks. My only comment would be, if you had sort of a superfine, or sorry, a small body weight merino ewe, you can probably push those increases back a further year, because they tend not to die at that higher rate until they probably start to hit 7 years of age. Essentially, the bigger the animal, the lower the lifespan, or the shorter the lifespan for those animals. Litter size increases with age, but it usually peaks at around 6 years of age and then starts to come down. And as a result, we see less or lower weaning percentages from ewes that are greater than 5 compared to ewes that are in that real cream of their life at 3, 4, and 5 years of age. Casting for age is still a common practice. And I guess the evidence that I'm going to present to you is that it's not supported by science. So we can use it as part of our risk factors, but not use it wholly and solely as the way to class ewes at the end of the year. So udder health, and this is probably, and the data I'll show you will really ram this home as a key thing to probably put a lot of emphasis on in your farm. But a 70% chance of losing at least one lamb if the ewe has a hard or lumpy udder pre-joining, compared with a 12% chance for normal ewes. So that's huge, and the results we've seen are similar to that, and I'll take you through those later. But I guess the one thing that take-home message for today is, if you're not already assessing ewes udders at the end of the year, you really need to start doing it. And the more emphasis your business has on producing lambs, as in if you're a prime lamb ewe flock out of composite ewes that generate you zero income from wool, or virtually zero, the more important this is. So a merino flock that's huge on wool production per hectare, there's going to be less incentive for that. But regardless, it's going to be an important thing, or it should be an important thing to consider when you think about what ewes go around. Again, abnormal teats also play a role, but not quite as significantly as hard or lumpy udders. And our asymmetric udders, we also saw a 26% chance of losing at least one lamb. So, and the other point is here that lambs grow slower out of these ewes as well. So not only are we weaning less, they're less kilos per lamb. So the drop off in kilos weaned per ewe is substantial. So mouths, and look, I grew up on a farm. This might shock a few people, but there's really no evidence that ewes should be culled based on a broken or gummy mouth. And the only time that we should really be putting a lot of emphasis on the mouth is when we've got loose or uneven teeth. And I guess if we think about that if we've got a sheep without any teeth at all, they can still grip and they can still get some food in. Whereas if you've got one incisor left, you think about how well you can grip feed when your mouth's doing that, as opposed to pad on pad. And unevenness has a similar effect because they're not able to get a good grip on that feed. So what we want people to focus more on is the condition score of the sheep. So a sheep that's poor in condition is clearly not handling that environment, and it's time to move that sheep on. Whereas animals that, they may have a broken mouth, but if they're still in really good condition, they're clearly functioning in the environment that you have. And lameness, so foot health, we know, plays a very important part of ability of a ewe to maintain weight, well, to put on weight in the spring, and to maintain weight once the feed conditions drop off. And of particular importance, if we think about the role between rams and ewes, is ewes go and seek out a ram once they're on heat. And a ewe that's lame is not going to do that. So there'll be two reasons why she won't do it. One, she won't want to walk to do it, but she's more likely to be in lower body condition score. So the chance of her actually cycling, and particularly having twins, is far lower. So depending on what that focus is on in your business, but we know that lame ewes are far less likely to get in lamb than sound sheep. So it should be part of our assessment tool. There's things we can do to intervene and perhaps improve the lameness, and that's where we need to assess, well, is this a permanent lameness, or is this something that is going to be fixed through running them through a foot bath, for example, if they had minor benign foot rot or scald. The other point I would make is sheep with foot abscess, we consider are more likely to get foot abscess next year, and animals that get foot abscess in late pregnancy are super high risk for pregnancy toxemia and hypocalcemia, because again, they're just not eating enough. They're not spending enough time on their feet to actually consume grass and energy. Condition score, anyone that knows anything about lifetime ewe management will be aware that condition score plays a role in conception rates. I'm not going to spend much time on it, except to say that sheep that you notice in a mob that are significantly lower, and I would say one condition score lower than the average, they don't necessarily have to be culled right then and there. In my opinion, they need to be identified, given the opportunity to improve in condition, and anything that doesn't respond really well should be culled, because there will be at times sheep that are low in condition because they've been super productive, and we just need to consider those sheep. But if we were to just have a hard and fast rule and get rid of those really light condition score sheep at the end of the year, in a farm that had been looking after twin and triplet pregnancies better, I would be comfortable with that. But if you were not scanning singles, twins, and managing them appropriately, we would expect that the twins and triplet ewes are going to be lighter at the end of the year. So we don't want to be culling out those sheep. But if they've been given the chance to be in good condition and they're not, it's definitely merit for considering to cull those sheep. And previous performance. So I think we hear a lot about sheep that don't raise a lamb should just be culled. There's really a lack. There's a real lack of science to just back this up. The repeatability of rearing performance is estimated to be about 10% from the literature review that we've done. So we know that there's an element of it being repeatable, but it's not something just to hang your hat on, that a sheep that hasn't reared a lamb is not going to rear a lamb again, and that's definitely not the case. So just consider this strongly, because the point I would make that if we've got maiden ewes that don't rear a lamb and we cull those, again, we've got to replace them with another maiden ewe. Well, generally that's what we replace them with, and we know maiden ewes have very poor reproductive performance compared to adult ewes. So and in fact, when we look at this, the comment there, that if a lamb was not reared from the ewe's first lambing, lamb mortality at age 3 was 27%. But if the first lamb was reared, the mortality was 13.5%. That's about the difference in lamb survival that I would expect between a maiden and an adult ewe. So we get rid of a 3-year-old ewe, we replace it with a 2-year-old, and we get exactly the same results, except generally we're feeding that maiden ewe more because she's younger and still growing, so she's probably costing us more as a business. So just something to think about is what are we replacing these sheep with? And again, stocking rate is a key driver, so we don't want to be just minimising the sheep on the farm, having productive sheep but not a productive farm. So this is just a bit of a scoring system that we came up with to allow us to determine what sheep should be in, what sheep should be out. So we essentially gave animals points, and this might look a little bit complicated, but in the end it was just so we could actually draw a line as to whether sheep were in or out of this trial. Were classified as out or not. So essentially we had a rule that if, and I'll just pull that up here. No, it's not there, sorry. If sheep scored 8 points, they were classified as very high risk to join again, and if they got 5 points, they were classified as a risk not to join again, and anything less than 5 was considered fit and sound to join. So you can see things had to accumulate together to knock a sheep out of, put them in the really high risk category. So essentially we put a little bit of emphasis on teeth, but if the sheep's teeth were loose, they got 5 points, but if they were in good condition, they wouldn't get any more points, and therefore they'd stay in the fit to join category. Whereas a sheep that had loose teeth and low condition would be tipped into the non-fit to join, and lameness similar. So a sheep that was lame but in good condition would actually stay, but once we had lameness and poor condition, they were out. And similarly, you can see here age. There was sheep there that were just automatically 8. If we had 9-year-old sheep, they were just an automatic cull, but that was a ranking system depending on how old they were. So a sheep that had a fair bit of age and it was skinny was out, whereas a sheep that might have been 7 years of age but otherwise fine was kept in as a healthy animal. And obviously the teat there, any damage to the teats or a significant lump got them nearly maximum points, and that's probably something that we would change now in hindsight, is we'd actually probably increase these scores to an automatic 8 for the mammary glands. But so that's what we did there. So essentially our case studies, which I will talk you through, we had 3 different farms, a merino and 2 crossbred farms, one mainly composites and the other one, well, sorry, one was entirely composites and the other one was sort of a blend between first cross and composites. And we classed these in December, and I'll just talk you through that really quickly. But we ran every ewe up the race right at the start. We had an ocky strap, and we were able to stand back about sort of 10 metres off the draft. So the ocky strap was used to keep the gate or the draft open essentially, and then we'd pull the gate back to us to let the sheep run straight through, and we just release the rope every time we wanted to take a sheep out that was lame. Why do we do that? Was because when you're at the front of a drafting race, sheep tend to really charge at you that last sort of 8 metres, and it's really hard to tell if they're lame, whereas if you can stand back, they're actually walking at a natural speed, and it's a lot easier to see whether they are sore or not. So we're able to take out anything that was lame. And then all sheep were mouthed, conditions scored, and udders were assessed. And those points were used to decide whether we took sheep out or not. And we electronically recorded all that information. Just to give you an idea, it took us, I think, about 13 days to do those 22,000 sheep, and it was just myself doing the actual assessing, and then I had someone else there who was recording the faults. But if you're in a commercial situation, you probably wouldn't need to do any recording. You just identify those sheep that need to be culled. So I don't know, it's sort of a 300 an hour sort of speed that we're. So yeah, so look, farm 2, I'm not exactly sure when you guys lost me, but farm 2, they cull sheep at 7 years of age, so not so many older sheep, but there was some sheep in there that were much lighter in condition, and a lot of udder lesions in that farm, and that's sort of reflecting of that's something they'd never done before. Farm 3 is that merino flock. Now these are all the sheep that, as I said before, that it had been turfed out of the self-replacing merino flock. A lot of old sheep, but they had actually focused a little bit on udders as probably the only selection criteria they'd had in the past, and they do a lot of wet and drying at land marking, but quite a lot of skin, poorer sheep, but very heavy stocking rate farm. So probably makes that look worse than what it is. But essentially, you can see the difference depending on the farm and depending on probably the selection pressure that they've been putting on, how that will impact where each individual farm might sit in that. So just what do we see on these farms? So we saw joining. So yeah, just to make it clear, these sheep that were classed as not fit to join, they had to run them through like they had planned on. And so we asked them to do their normal classing in November and to present to us the sheep that they would normally join the following year. But then they had to run these. So even though we identified sheep in there that really had absolutely no chance of raising a lamb, they were, we essentially said to them, you're not a part of this assessment. We'll do it, and we'll store the data on the individuals, and but you've got to run them through the way that you normally would have if we weren't involved. So you can see the dry percentage was significantly higher in the ewes that were classed as unfit to join. And I will point out that Farm 3, they do a really short, sharp joining with their merino ewes, and we've only followed through that short, sharp joining. So they will have had a subsequent chance to join some of these sheep, but we only looked at early joining of those sheep. So 9.7 and 20, so 10% dry versus 20%, and the scanning percentages at 146% and 130. So you can see some big difference there. And when we did an analysis on that, ewes were 4.4 times more likely to be scammed empty if they were classed unfit, and 3 times more likely to die between joining and marking than fit ewes. So you can see some pretty glaring differences in the performance of those animals. Now the results, and this is just, I'll just take you through each farm really briefly. This is just looking at the twins on Farm 1. So we saw the rest of the farm, healthy sheep here, did 168% marking rate on ewes in the paddock, whereas our older twins, so we actually were able to break the ewes up a little bit based on pre-lambing, based on the different reasons why they've been thrown out. So the second row here were the old ewes. We had 156%, but you can see 157% in sheep that had other issues. So these would have been lighter conditioned and lame sheep, but the ewes with bad udders were down to 134% out of otherwise healthy crossbred twin-bearing ewes. So you can see pretty dramatic differences in the marking percentages with those sheep. I know there's a lot on this page, but we got a lot better data out of this place because the way that we've got singles, twins, and triplets here, and you can see the single fit ewes were at 99%, which is an extraordinary marking, and I don't really normally see that. I suspect there must be a few twins in with the singles to get that sort of marking results. But the unfit sheep, so the other ewes, even though we're only raising one lamb, still only had 77% survival. And our skinny and older sheep were back at 90%, so still a reasonable drop off on those farms. Our twin ewes 162% in the fit sheep. The udder sheep down at 125%. So very similar, repeatable numbers to what we saw in farm 1 in terms of the udders. But the skinny lame sheep still performed well. They performed actually exceptionally well, and the other sheep, which will have probably been the older ewes, were at 146%. And you can see in the triplets, we've got 226% in the fit ewes, and the unfit ewes were at 151%. So half of those lambs died in the unfit, and we can also see a huge difference in ewe mortality percentages between those two mobs. Farm 3 singles were identical, whether they were fit or unfit. Twins 125 versus 118%. So not as dramatic the differences on this farm, but that was when they were all grouped together, the unfit ewes. We weren't able to split them up in, as well as some of the other farms. But you can still see a difference in there, and just bear in mind that they didn't have the udder lesion issues. That was the farm that had very few udder problems compared to the farms 1 and 2. So they all tell different sort of stories, and these are case studies. They're not a specific scientific experiment to tell you exactly what the difference in marking percentage will be, but they're just sort of taking the science that we know, putting it out on farm, and then reporting back those results, because I think it's likely to be what we'd see in other situations. So lambs did have a 21% higher risk of death from scanning through to marking if their mother had been classed with a bad udder, which I think is pretty telling. And we saw a 22% lower marking percentage from ewes that were joined as unfit compared to those that were classified as fit. So look, take home message is don't just get at the end of the draft and decide that, okay, the blue taggers that were born in 2015 are the sheep that need to go this year because they're going to be 7 next year. I'm sure there will be plenty of healthy sheep in that group of sheep that you could run through for another year. But look at them hard. If there's anything wrong with the udder, they've got to go. If they're skinny, they've got to go. If they're lame, they need to go. But if they're otherwise healthy, we can get a reasonable outcome with them. And similarly, let's look at the 2 to 5 year old sheep, and let's look for problems in those, because you will be carrying sheep in there that should otherwise probably be retained for breeding and to get sheep out of. The other point I do want to make that we haven't probably been able to capture as well as, or I guess is what I think's really happened with this project, is if we think about sheep with bad udders, they tend to present in wonderful condition score at the end of the year, because a lot of them actually haven't raised lambs, right? So you know how we saw a 4 times greater risk of a ewe being dry at the start of at scanning time. I think we've really turfed out a lot of the skinny and lame sheep early in the trial, and then we've carried through with the sheep that are in good condition but have poor lamb rearing ability, being the sheep with bad udders. So we've captured, I guess there's 2 different things there that we're capturing. The poor conception is our skinny lame sheep, sheep maybe that have mouths that are affecting them, but stage 2 is can they rear lambs, which is what I've just shown you with the lamb survival. But we will be developing some material on the back end of this, which will be hopefully out there in sort of 6 months for producers. But I think it's a pretty astounding results, and every one of these farmers have said that's amazing. I want to get rid of those sheep, because when they took out the non-performers and looked at the performance of their ewes, they were really satisfied with the lamb survival results they were getting. But that 10-15% of ewes were really dragging down their overall farm performance, and probably leading to a lot of frustration as to why they couldn't get results like other people. And I think that's probably likely to be a reflection of a lot of producers around the country. Questions? So.
No, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. It's like you say, it's probably to get that sort of, I'll just make myself the presenter, and there we go, share my screen. Yeah, so to get that sort of real on-time data on farm that really backs up the science, and to have the really, like you've presented some really great take-home messages for producers, I think it's really valuable outcome from the project. So both presentations have been fantastic. Now, Andrew, I have a question from Emily King. She's just wanting to know whether did any of the case study farms wet and dry at marking?
Yeah, so Farm 3 historically has, but bear in mind, so they're the merino self-replacing and merinos to a terminal. So in their terminal flock, they always wet and dry, and sometimes they'll get rid of those sheep, but not a lot. So they'll generally go, oh, you're a 3-year-old ewe, we can get wool off you for the next 4 or 5 years. You can stay. So while they do it, they don't necessarily cull every sheep that fails to rear a lamb, and there's a lot of sheep in that flock we looked at that have been thrown out of the self-replacing merino to merino flock because they were dry at marking. So it's a farm practice done, but it's not a farm practice that, well, it probably negatively impacts on the flock that we're looking at, that we looked at. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so perhaps maybe it's impacting on their wool production. So perhaps maybe they don't breed from the ewes, but keep those as wool producers to get that income from the wool without putting those fallow rear genes back into their flock.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they do. They turf them out of the self-replacing flock, but they keep them and join them to a terminal.
All right, excellent. So there's no more questions, and we'll wrap it up. So I just want to thank Mary and Andrew for their great practical presentations. It's got some really good take-home messages and information for producers. I'm sorry about the technical issues halfway through. So thank you everyone for participating in the webinar. And once I'll put the recording on the website in the next few days, so you can actually go and have a look at it. And again, if anyone does have any questions that come to mind, please get in contact with me, and I can put you directly in contact with the presenters, and I can set your information for you. So thank you everyone for participating today. Have a wonderful day, and we will be back in 2022 with some more SRSP webinars. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hey, guys.